The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Ocarina of Time. By Ganondorf 8. March 24, 2015. Chapter 54, To Become Accepted, and the Training.
I've heard of your fine work from my guards, and I must admit that I'm impressed with how you made it this far. The Gerudo have been humiliated by your actions, and if the great Ganondorf were to discover how one little girl was able to run around his homeland without restraint,
said Spitfire.
So you're the one in charge?
I asked.
I am second in command, and a faithful follower of my king. 7 years ago, he recognized my talents, and named me his most trusted vassal after the previous one was removed. Neighboru could have become so much more had she chosen to remain loyal, but her rebellious nature compelled me to expose her. My people have prospered since then under my leadership, yet it appears that they are inept all because they couldn't kill you,
replied Spitfire.
What you refer to as rebellious is in fact helping them see the truth,
I said.
And how have you come to such a conclusion?
Asked Spitfire.
I've gathered a lot of information during my time here, and I'm disgusted at how bad things are. Neighboru knew that Ganondorf was an evil man, for his desire for power made him a threat. Her focus was on protecting her people not only from him, but from the other tribes who could have either declared war against you, or isolate you even more than ever. Despite all of those efforts, she was exiled simply because she posed a threat to his dominion, and her actions would have caused the others to want to take the same path,
I replied.
Yes, she always did have their best interests in mind, but she was willing to break the law of the tribe,
said Spitfire. At this point, I did have to agree with Spitfire, as Rainbow Dash was someone who always followed the rules no matter what, yet she was willing to break them to protect her people from an outside world which was unaware of what was happening.
Our law states that we must obey the one who becomes king of the Gerudo, and to defy such a sacred part of our society is nothing short of being a traitor. Neighboru deserved to be executed, but instead she was banished and forced to live in exile.
These words did fill me with anger over how she was treating Rainbow Dash, but I'm in no position to question any kind of authority. Still, I knew that these words weren't her own sincere opinion, but rather what the two witches were making her say, so how can I reach through to her without really knowing what to do?
Do you still defend such actions even now that you know the truth? Perhaps you're the one who needs to understand the truth,
I said.
Really now? Do tell, as I'm quite curious,
said Spitfire.
I don't claim to know what happened between you and Neighboru, but what I do know is that she did everything in her power to keep everyone safe, and that includes even you. Spitfire, you say you're in charge of this fortress, yet from what I've been seeing and hearing, that clearly isn't the case,
I said.
Don't tell me some of the guards revealed sensitive information,
asked Spitfire.
You just answered your own question,
I replied.
Have they no willpower? I told them constantly to never reveal information to outsiders, for the secrets of the Gerudo must never become known to our enemies. No wonder they are all so incompetent, but I should have known that given how they failed in their duty to kill you. Even one of our strongest warriors was bested by you, and that is something I won't allow to stand,
said Spitfire. The anger in her voice indicated that the evil controlling her mind was making her mad, and I feared she was going to act in a manner which was liable to get her killed. I was in no condition to fight because of what I endured in my previous fight against the Gerudo thief, so I needed to find another way to get her thinking again.
So you plan on taking me on yourself?
I asked.
I should have done that from the beginning instead of relying on my useless guards to carry out the task,
replied Spitfire.
How can you refer to them as such when you've been misleading their actions with questionable decisions?
I asked.
I'll admit that I was changing my mind far too often, but since my last dream, I'm no longer suffering from the headache which was causing it to happen. I am curious though as to what became of that kind voice, for it reminded me of something that happened a long time ago, but that was back in the past, and I must think about the future,
replied Spitfire. This other voice could have been Rainbow Dash, for she is the only one I can think of who would be kind to her. If I can tap into this somehow, I'll be able to avoid another needless battle.
I don't want to fight you,
I began.
It's not like you can even beat me, for those wounds look as though they haven't healed. Despite failing in the end, the Gerudo thief managed to do some real work on you. Guess something good managed to work around here for a change, and I'm aware of your ability to use magic, so don't think you have any kind of advantage,
said Spitfire. At that moment, I noticed something shiny coming out of her pocket which she also took notice of, and struggled to push it back in as though she was afraid of it breaking.
Why does this keep on slipping out? It's really starting to get on my nerves. What's that you have there?
I asked.
This? I don't know how I got it, but it appeared suddenly after I woke up,
replied Spitfire.
It looks like a locket, yet you're not the kind of person who would wear something like that,
I said.
For once, we're in agreement, so why don't you have it? I can kill you without too much trouble. I might as well give you a small gift as a way of saying that in another time, you would have become an honorary member of the Gerudo,
said Spitfire. Her choice of words while attempting to be meaningful instead made me cringe, but I had no intention of accepting this gift as she called it. I had a hunch that this locket would break the evil power that controls her mind, but to prove my theory, she had to take it out of her pocket as it was useless otherwise. As she pulled it out, she noticed the engraving on it, and quickly came to a stop before staring long and hard at it like she was possessed.
Neighboru and I were merely common thieves living here in the fortress, and we were the closest of friends even though I was much older. The great Ganondorf's second-in-command at the time died in a skirmish during the war, and he was looking for someone to ascend to that position for reasons known only to him. And you were chosen?
I asked.
I was one of the ones he considered, but he ultimately chose her because she proved her worth that day, all because of the incident which cemented her place by his side. I worked so hard to gain his favor, yet she was picked instead. Just thinking about it angers me so much because she stole what was mine, and she knew that but refused to decline his recommendation. I had to become her subordinate for years, which was perhaps the most humiliating thing in the world. Yet she got so much glamour as the second-in-command that all of the Gerudo worshipped her,
replied Spitfire.
What happened during that incident?
I asked.
One of our training regiments went out of control, and she risked her life to save everyone from an avalanche. Even though I accidentally caused it, Neighboru protected me by saying it was some kind of natural element. As thanks for saving me from being exiled, I gave her this locket, and asked her to make an engraving that would remind us of our friendship,
replied Spitfire.
She made sure you wouldn't get the blame for almost killing your people, and what did you go and do in return? You spat on her kindness and decided to dedicate your life to plotting her downfall,
I said. Now this problem was adding up, and I can understand why the witches chose to manipulate her mind. Had she confessed to her mistake, no doubt the resulting punishment would have been expulsion, or even death. At that point, she was vulnerable to being manipulated as her dream had been crushed, for Rainbow Dash inadvertently displayed the requirements of being a leader, and Ganondorf chose her to become his second-in-command.
You do have the makings of a leader, but you allowed darkness to consume you. Nibiru must have suspected this from the start, and attempted to help you. When she was exiled, she must have told you something which made you begin changing your ways, and you continued with that philosophy until recently. Yes, I remember her saying that, although I was annoyed that she had to get in one last word,
said Spitfire.
She wanted you to carry on her mission of changing things for the better,
I said.
Got any proof to back up that claim?
Asked Spitfire.
I've nothing to show, but then what do you suppose Nibiru would have wanted?
I asked.
To do what was necessary to save our people, but then she failed in her duty to fulfill such a promise. Because I made sure that she was exiled from the tribe. Gasp. I'm at fault for driving her away,
replied Spitfire. She clutched her head again, and began to complain that her headache had come back, but I think it was her good side attempting to cast out the evil. I had no idea what was going on inside of her head, but she needed to resolve it on her own using her own heart.
Nibiru, you truly deserved becoming second in command, but I allowed the darkness to get in the way of that, and all because it wanted to retain the status quo of the great. No? Of Ganondorf.
It looked like her headache was getting worse, and then she began to scream.
I was wrong all about Nibiru, and I never should concocted the means to have her exiled. Ganondorf may be the king, but he isn't my king. I'm sorry for making everyone suffer, especially when it came to dealing with you. Hey kid! I could use some support if you're willing. All you had to do was ask,
I smiled as I walked over to her and held her hands. I'm not sure how my own presence was able to do this, but apparently it was enough to give Spitfire the strength she needed. Those expressions on her face, combined with the sweat dripping down her brow, did make me feel a little nauseous, but within her subconscious, she was fighting to win back her freedom.
What are you doing? Taking back my life,
replied Spitfire.
You dare to defy his will? If not for me, you'd be nothing more than a common thief. Now, stop with this foolish rebellion and kill the girl at once. She mustn't be allowed to leave the fortress, and enter the desert. Because that's where she must go to save the kingdom? You're afraid of anyone trying to ruin your plans, so you manipulated me into carrying out your wishes without me even knowing about it. Until Nibiru, or rather a spirit version of her, told me the truth. She was the one who gave me that locket as a reminder of our friendship, which I tried to destroy out of petty jealousy,
said Spitfire.
Then I'll control your body, and perform the task myself.
The evil spirit then charged towards Spitfire, but then a bright light blasted it from all directions, obliterating it.
No. I destroyed you, accursed spirit. You've gone and ruined everything. I will make certain that you will pay for your actions when the time comes.
Stepping forth from the light was Rainbow Dash, and she had a smile on her face. This left Spitfire confused because she saw this spirit perish, but the spirit representing the former second-in-command of the Gerudo placed her hand on her shoulder.
You were able to defeat and drive off the evil spirit which had been controlling your mind,
said Rainbow Dash.
It's all because of you,
said Spitfire.
No, you had the power to finally break free of her control. Now the time has come for you to rebuild the Gerudo, and it won't be easy, for your actions have caused them to lose faith in you, so you must regain their trust. The hero of time can also be credited for helping you, as the light inside of her is what provided the final push you required,"
said Rainbow Dash.
"But what about you?"
asked Spitfire.
"The real Neighboru vanished after her exile, but no one really knows what became of her. It is a mystery that the hero will figure out, for she must go to the temple in the desert. Spitfire, you must guide her to the desert if she is to free this land from Ganondorf. If you feel she may not be ready to face the trials, perhaps having her take on the training ground of your people will be suffice. It's time for me to disappear back into the recesses of your mind,"
replied Rainbow Dash.
"Will I ever see you again?"
asked Spitfire.
"I'll always be here, but as for the real Neighboru, only the hero can determine that,"
replied Rainbow Dash. That's when Spitfire woke up with a sudden start which caused me to fall over, and she immediately reached out with her hand to pick me up.
"Hero of time, you helped save myself from the darkness, and words alone cannot even begin to express my gratitude. You appear to be rather exhausted, especially after that battle against one of the strongest of our warriors, so I suggest that you get some rest. You can use the empty cell where the prisoner once was, and allow your wounds to heal a little bit,"
said Spitfire.
"Don't you want to talk things out?"
I asked.
"This is a matter that can only be discussed among my people, outsiders are not permitted. Now, please get some rest, for you have much to do once the sun rises,"
replied Spitfire. She then turned around and walked off without saying another word, and I was wondering if she was going to be alright given how she is forcing herself to take on so much guilt. Spike then urged me to get to bed because we were most likely going to be granted access to the desert, but I was still worried about Spitfire.
"Do you think she'll be okay?"
I asked.
"It won't be easy for her to plead for forgiveness, but I suppose acknowledging there was a problem is a good first step. If the Gerudo decide that she is no longer fit to lead them, then she will most likely step down,"
replied Spike.
"I think she should be given a second chance," I said. "Why do you think that?"
asked Spike.
"Back in the human world, when I admitted to everyone of my actions, I was able to get a second chance, although it was a difficult period for me. It took a long time for me to earn the trust of my friends and fellow students, but I managed to turn my life around and become better off for it. Spitfire may have made a lot of mistakes, but she is willing to pay for her actions. They won't sentence her to execution, as that would make them no better than she was, yet being exiled isn't going to solve things either," I replied. "Whatever is going to end up happening, it's something we can't interfere with, for only they can resolve their issues," said Spike. "A shame that they view all outsiders with such disdain," I sighed. "With what the Gerudo have endured for generations, they feel as though the other tribes mock their existence. No matter how good your efforts may be, Sunset Shimmer, this is an issue that will continue to haunt them for years to come," said Spike. As I got onto the bed and drifted off to sleep, a dark conversation was happening somewhere in the shadows, but it wasn't one filled with rage, but rather with plans on where to go forward. "It would appear that Spitfire has broken free from my control over her." "As you predicted it would, but I am not surprised, for she has a much stronger will than you anticipated. You may think of my people as being nothing more than savage beasts, yet they have proven they are capable of so much more. I just cannot believe she was able to overcome my influence, and all because of that girl. Perhaps your magic has grown weaker over the years, or you've been underestimating the power of this kid. There is no doubt now in my mind that she has one of the keys I need in order to gain complete dominion, and her actions in my fortress have proven this. Even though Spitfire has ended up betraying me, it was worth it in the end to confirm my suspicions. Then we must strike down the traitorous wench, and all others who oppose you. No, leave the Gerudo where they stand. Their fate is of no concern to me now, for I no longer have need of them as their usefulness ended on that day 7 years ago. And what of the girl, O great Ganondorf? She will make it to the Spirit Temple, for she possesses the means to make the crossing, and the power she wields inside of her will ensure her survival. Upon her entry into your domain, you will be able to carry out the contingency plans that you have prepared. Even though I know that you two will not fail in your task, would you prefer to have some assistance?
Asked Tyrek.
Do you doubt in the ability of your mothers? I am skeptical that you can succeed in defeating the girl before she breaks the curse. You two may possess tremendous magical power, but the girl has proven constantly that she is more than worthy to handle any kind of challenge that is thrown against her. It is possible that she may be able to defeat the two of you even when you use the true extent of your abilities, but it's too soon to determine what might happen.
Replied Tyrek.
How can you say such things like that? What I care about are results, and so far you have not delivered. Granted, you did say that your control over Spitfire would break, yet you didn't know that it would shatter so quickly. If you wish to please me, then you know what needs to be done. Even if it ends up costing you your very lives. If you are unable to complete such a simple task, then perhaps someone else will suffice.
Replied Tyrek.
You don't mean? The she-demon, even as I speak, has now entered the temple, and is waiting for the girl to arrive. I approve of her methods, especially after she manipulated various factors within the Shadow Temple. This creature just may kill the girl, and acquire what she has been desiring, or she may end up perishing for good at the hands of her counterpart. No matter what the outcome, everything is progressing exactly as I want it to, and it will only be a matter of time before the other reveals herself. When that happens, I will have everything in my hands, and my reign over this world shall become absolute.
Replied Tyrek.
I guess your other mother and I will go back to the temple. By all means have fun torturing her until she dies, but make sure that the power she holds remains intact,
said Tyrek.
As you wish, great Ganondorf.
The rest of the night passed by without incident, and when I woke up, my wounds had healed for the most part. Although I did have some scars here and there, yet I was worried about Spitfire. Was she going to be executed? Or will she be exiled into the desert? When I turned to face the area where I battled against the Gerudo thief, standing in the center of the room was Spitfire herself, and it looked as though she had been waiting for me to wake up.
It looks as though you had a pleasant sleep,
said Spitfire.
Considering what I've endured throughout this journey, I needed a good rest to regain my composure, but what about you? I'm guessing that you had a lot of explaining to do.
I said.
While I can't go into the full details, I can tell you that my people were furious over the way I treated them. It will take a long time for me to regain their trust, but all I can do is focus on gaining it a single day at a time. If there is any consolation, it would be that I am still the second in command, yet I feel as though it's a title that I shouldn't have, for I acquired it through such deceitful means,
said Spitfire.
Then you should make it worth something,
I suggested.
Perhaps, although I would rather Neburu have the honor of being our leader,
said Spitfire.
As you know, she disappeared 7 years after she was exiled to the desert,
I said.
I have a suspicion that the two witches had something to do with her disappearance, but I'm not sure if this is true or not, as people have been getting lost in those sands for a long time,"
said Spitfire. To be honest, I was hoping she would know, as it would have given me some kind of clue to go with upon entering the desert. Many apparently have gotten lost in the desert beyond the fortress, and their fates remain unknown, so what chance do I have of making it to the temple?
Now that I think about it, you haven't given me the pleasure of your name.
Spitfire was right, as I learned of her name through her guards repeating it several times over, yet she has never heard mine.
My name is Sunset Shimmer, I said. A very interesting name that has a familiarity with my own, so would that make you a daughter of the desert?
Asked Spitfire.
I guess, I answered. Ha! I'm kidding, for I'm aware that you come from the forest, as you have a fairy flying around you. Now that I've gotten to know you a little better, I can tell you're quite an experienced adventurer. I really mean it. I've seen your fine work. To get past the guards here, you must have good thieving skills. I served under the exalted Neburu, and never have I seen anyone with the skills you possess. Heh, it's been a long time since I referred to her by that title,"
said Spitfire. It sounds like she longs for those old days where she was just a simple thief, but then things spiraled out of control. I have a feeling she will be fine from this point on, but I was curious as to where she was going with this explanation.
Anyway, her headquarters used to be in the Spirit Temple, which is at the end of the desert, but she was forced to leave, which I'm sure you've been told by one of the others. That must be the final temple I need to reach, I said. Yes, you need to cross the haunted wasteland to reach the desert colossus where the temple is located, but only those who have permission can go. Say, you must want to become one of us, eh? All right, then. You're in from now on,
said Spitfire.
I'm sorry,
I asked.
You really desire to become a Gerudo thief because you definitely have the skills. Take this. With it, you will have free access to all areas of the fortress,
replied Spitfire. She walked over to me before handing over what looked like a tattered piece of paper. There were some words written on it, but I had no idea what it said, for I don't understand the Hylian language.
What I have just given you is the Gerudo token, the proof that you are now an honorary member of the tribe. Everyone will recognize you as one of us, and will share with you any advice you may need. From now on, you're free to come and go as you please through the fortress without fear. Then I guess this is goodbye, I said. I'm not going to let you go into the desert just yet, for I think you need to have a little more skill, said Spitfire. What kind of skill do I need? I asked. It's more like training as opposed to a skill, and you could do with becoming stronger. I recommend you enter our training facility, for it will give you a chance to experience the kinds of hardships that we deal with every day. While I know you need to go to the temple, taking on this small challenge shouldn't take very long for one as skilled as you,
replied Spitfire.
I'm sure it couldn't hurt, so I'll give it a go, I said.
Maybe I should have given this a lot more thought instead of simply agreeing to something which I had no idea as to what it was going to be, but I said that I would try, and I'm one who would never refuse a challenge. She then turned around and started to walk forward, where I followed after her, and soon I found myself back outside of the fortress. She turned left and walked a long distance as I kept up behind her, and soon she stopped in front of a fenced-off entrance which looked rather suspicious. There was a Gerudo woman standing in front of the entrance, and her white clothes indicated her position in the tribe as support personnel.
This is the place,
said Spitfire.
It looks rather small,
I commented.
You may think that it does, but when you go inside and see for yourself, it will become apparent just how big our training ground really is. Every day, we make a habit of spending at least 30 minutes within the grounds so as to maintain our physiques, and also keep up with our fighting skills. I would go into more detail, but I feel the attendant here can explain things a lot better than I can. When you come back outside upon finishing, I'll be waiting here for you,
said Spitfire. That's when I turned my attention to the attendant who reached out with her hand, and if I didn't know any better, I could swear she was waiting for some kind of bribe.
Hey newcomer! So this is your training facility?
I asked.
Yep. This is known as the Garudoa's training ground where we hone our skills as warriors, but only the best are allowed to go inside and challenge it. Madam Spitfire has a lot of faith in you considering she insisted on you attempting this challenge, so who am I to deny someone she personally picked? First, I need to make sure you have the proper membership as we do take that seriously.
I then showed her the Garudo token that I acquired a short time ago, and she checked it over to confirm its authenticity.
Token verification confirmed, so now you are ready to enter. And that will be 10 rupees. Only 10?
I asked.
Money is pretty scarce around here, so we need as much of it as possible. So what is my objective?
I asked.
You will be going through a series of rooms with different challenges, and your task is to complete each one to acquire a key. I would go into more detail, but I'll allow the booming voice inside to handle things from here. You are allowed to use any and all weapons you have at your disposal including magic and potions, and you have as much time as you wish to accomplish your goal.
I handed over the 10 rupees, and upon doing so, the Garudo attendant clapped her hands twice which caused the fence to slide away to the right.
Good luck inside newcomer.
It felt weird being referred to as that, yet what was weirder was how nice they were treating me when only a few hours ago were they desire to see me killed. When I entered the grounds, I found myself inside of a large room where all of the doors were inside giant lion head statues, and I'll be honest when I say that this was pretty intimidating.
Why did you want to come here?
Asked Spike.
Spitfire recommended I should take on this challenge, I replied. I was there when she made the suggestion, said Spike. Do you think I should have refused, and instead asked to be given permission to go into the desert?
I asked.
She did say that you needed to become stronger, so I guess their training ground is ideal for that. No one among the Garudo has ever conquered this before, for they have long claimed that it's too difficult, so you do have your work cut out for you. The various traps and monsters that lurk in here are a combination of elements we've already seen, but we may end up encountering some new problems which will most likely require you to apply new strategies.
Replied Spike.
Surely you don't mean to say that what we have to go intends on killing me?
I asked.
Of course, because that's how the Garudo handle their training. Why go up against imitations of traps and monsters when you can handle the real thing? This is the way they do things, for they have been training in this manner for generations.
Replied Spike. Now I really wish that I had refused Spitfire's recommendation because I wasn't confident about having to fight like they do. Then again, Sheik did say that I needed to become like them in spirit, so this would be the means for me to do that. I had no choice but to go through with this of course as I accepted the challenge, and to back down now before I even start would label me as a coward in their eyes. As soon as I took a single step forward, the booming voice began to speak out, but luckily the attendant warned me ahead of time, otherwise I'd be really scared right now.
If you can overcome the trials in the chambers ahead, then, and only then will you be qualified to hold our secret treasure. I didn't know there was a treasure here,
I said.
It must have to do with collecting keys,
said Spike.
I'm not looking forward to these trials,
I said. For some reason, the door right in front of me was appealing to me the most, so I walked to it, and entered the next room where I found myself staring at numerous fenced walls strewn about like a maze. There were locked doors which indicated that I needed a lot of keys if I was to progress through here. Then I noticed the large treasure chest in the middle of the room, and that meant that the treasure the voice mentioned must be located inside of it.
No doubt that this is the main puzzle,
said Spike.
All of those locked doors, and no means of trying to get around the fences,
I said.
If you desire to acquire our hidden treasure, you must strive to obtain the keys hidden in each chamber.
The booming voice wasn't taking any punches when it came to reminding me that if I want whatever lies within that chest, I had to overcome each of their challenges, which could be just about anything.
I guess there's nothing we can do in this room aside from go back and try one of the other directions,
I replied.
You may not have to overcome all of the trials,
suggested Spike.
While that might be true, I'm going to attempt to beat them all just in case I need some extra keys,
I said. Walking back into the entrance room, I decided to go to the left, although the way to the right was also a good direction, seeing as both ways would have trials waiting to challenge me. The next room upon opening the door was rather small in size, but I ignored this due to the BMOs. There were also some strange creatures which looked a lot like those lizards I encountered back in Dodongo's cavern, yet they looked much fiercer.
What are those?
I asked.
They are Dinolfos, a stronger version of the Lizalfos which you have battled before. Unlike their weaker cousins, Dinolfos move about a lot more often, and tend to use jump attacks at a greater pace. Also, hitting them can be hard because they tend to jump back before you can hit them, so this is going to make things difficult. Aside from these differences, you can fight them in the same manner as their cousins, but you'll need to have a faster reaction time,
replied Spike.
Defeat all the enemies in a limited time. How much time do I get?
I asked.
You must prevail within 90 seconds or perish. That's not a lot of time to defeat two stronger versions of a monster which I struggled against,
I moaned. The two Dinolfos proceeded to move forward with large bounding steps, and began to swing their swords at me, which I had to dodge as fast as possible. Each of their swings required extreme timing, but I knew that I couldn't afford to do this for very long as I was in a race against time to defeat them and the BMOs within 90 seconds. Why must I be forced to handle such stressful moments like this? As the monsters kept swinging their swords around, I was starting to get tired, and that's when one sword slashed me across the chest. The pain was devastating to say the least given how strong these two were, but I couldn't stop to check on the wound as I needed to get this finished before it was too late.
Things aren't looking good,
said Spike.
You think?
I asked sarcastically.
Maybe this would be a good time to try out the big Goron's sword that you spent a long time trying to get,
suggested Spike.
Will it be effective?
I asked.
While the Master Sword can defeat monsters at a pretty good pace, the big Goron's sword is even stronger and can defeat the same monsters at twice the speed. Big Goron did say that it was the strongest blade, so now the time has come to see just how strong. Be careful though, as you won't be able to use your shield as it's a two-handed weapon,
replied Spike. Drawing the big Goron's sword from its scabbard, I almost fell over because of how heavy it was, yet I quickly managed to get used to the weight before swinging it around without thinking. While this wasn't the best course of action, I didn't have time to take every hit into consideration, so the best I could do is swing and hope I connect. The Dinolfos had no idea as to what I was doing, so they couldn't defend themselves from my wild swinging. After a couple of hits against them, in addition to being hit once or twice, the two dinosaur monsters fell down defeated, and that left only the Beamos, which wasn't really a threat at all. I took the bomb bag from my belt before taking out a bomb, and tossed it, which blew the monster up.
"Did I make it?"
I asked.
"You did defeat all three monsters,"
replied Spike.
"What I meant is that did I accomplish the challenge within the allotted time?"
I asked.
"I'm assuming you have, otherwise you would have perished by now,"
replied Spike. All of a sudden, a small treasure chest dropped from the ceiling and landed near where the Beamos had been, so I walked over and kicked it open, where I took out the first small key. Upon putting the big Goron sword away, I sat down on the floor and began to breathe heavily, as that encounter was truly intense. I had one key needed for the central chamber, but many more were required if I aimed to collect the treasure.
"So where should we go next?"
I asked.
"We could try the door we didn't take back in the entrance room, or we could go through the one over there,"
replied Spike.
"Both will no doubt lead into a challenge," I said. The irony here, Sunset Shimmer, is that these challenges are typical for the Gerudo, as survival means a great deal to them. What they endure in here are things that the other tribes have never had to deal with, so in a way you have to give them a lot of credit for wanting to train themselves every single day. The Royal Guard could have learned a lot from them, and perhaps adopted some of their tactics into their own regimen. Sadly, the viewpoint that the Gerudo have on men would have prevented anything of the sort from happening,"
said Spike.
"Maybe over time they'll get used to viewing men as something of importance," I said.
That's when I came to the decision to continue going in the current direction, and backtrack the other way when I can't go any further. Opening the door and entering the next room, the pathway went down some steps before opening up into a massive chamber filled with lava. There were small platforms everywhere, with several of them containing silver rupees, and I cringed knowing that I had to solve another puzzle where I had to collect gems in order to proceed.
"Cross the Sea of Fire." "I'm guessing the hover boots will be needed,"
I suggested.
"It would make jumping from platform to platform an easier task, but you should still be careful, as you could end up being attacked from below by a red bubble. This is the kind of place where they thrive, and if they hit you while crossing, you may end up getting knocked back and fall into the lava,"
said Spike.
"I can also see a switch over there, as well as one platform with a circle of fire on it," I said. "There's no reason for me to explain what will happen when you activate the switch, right?"
asked Spike.
"Of course not," I replied.
This wasn't going to be easy, as one mistake will send me straight into the inferno, and the Goron tunic will only protect me for a few seconds. It's times like these that I wish Pinkie Pie were here, as she could easily handle this situation, but she is with the other sages, so it falls to me to get through this challenge. Switching over to the hover boots, once again I ended up struggling to maintain my balance because of losing my traction. These platforms were small in size, so if I were to slide along too much, I'll go over the side and into the lava. After taking a couple of minutes to plan my course, I was about to get started when I needed to ask one small question.
"Will I be timed on this, considering that I was given a time limit in the last room?" "You were only told to cross this lava-filled room," so I'd say you can take as long as you want,
replied Spike.
That's a relief, as I don't want to be in a race against time, especially while wearing these boots,
I said. Getting the first 2 silver rupees was easy as they were on platforms right in front of me, but the third one was a fair distance away, and a fourth was inside of the circle of fire. Then again, activating that switch should get rid of the fire long enough for me to grab it, so I turned to the left where I saw the platform with the switch on it. Running across, a red bubble came out of the lava, but it merely went by to my left without bothering me, yet I felt it was going to be problematic when I go back. Once I pressed the switch, the fire disappeared and I probably had 30 seconds before it comes back, so I began to make my way over there. Sure enough, the red bubble popped up in front of me, but I had no time to get out of the way, so I did the unthinkable and rolled while hovering. It did hit me in the process, but I didn't get knocked back due to having curled up into a ball.
Now that was some creative thinking,
said Spike.
I didn't think I could do that,
I said.
When floating in the air while wearing the hover boots, you can still perform your normal actions. Anyway, you need to collect that silver rupee before the circle of fire comes back, so enough talking and focus on getting it,
said Spike. When I got back to the previous platform, I turned to face the one where the fire was, and ran over to it collecting the rupee, and going over to the other one where I picked up rupee number 4. Now I needed one more, so I began looking around. Sure enough, it was located just below the ceiling, and the hook shot plate was an indication of what I needed to use. I took out the long shot and fired the chain after aiming carefully towards my target, and I found myself being pulled up to the ceiling. Upon getting rupee number 5, iron bars disappeared from a nearby door, but it was the key on top of a ledge on the other side of the room which piqued my interest.
I wonder how I'm supposed to get that key up there,
I said.
There must be something more to this room which we're missing, said Spike. All collecting those silver rupees did for us was unlock that door over there, and I'm guessing another trial awaits behind it. Since you're a fairy, Spike, is it possible you can detect things that should be there, but can't be seen even with the lens of truth?
I asked.
I'm getting what you're saying, and that is well within my abilities. I'm surprised at you, Sunset Shimmer, for coming up with all of these different ideas without having to ask me to figure it out. No doubt you've definitely grown throughout this journey,
replied Spike.
Guess this adventure has allowed me to see myself in a way I never knew existed before,
I said. Making my way back towards that high ledge, Spike suddenly turned green, which made me think he was sick, but he assured me that he was completely fine. He mentioned that he could sense something was there, and that using the Ocarina of Time would help reveal its location. I took out the instrument from the pouch on my belt, but what song should I play to do whatever it is I'm supposed to do? Spike said that even though it was a weird choice, playing the Song of Time would work. Well, who am I to question his vast knowledge? I played the song, and 2 blue blocks with the symbol seen in the Temple of Time materialized next to the ledge, and one was slightly lower than the other to form steps.
In the past, whenever I had to deal with those kinds of blocks, all I ever did was make them disappear. I had no idea that they could be brought back, or made to reappear. You never had a situation that allowed for it to happen,
said Spike.
Once again, this world continues to leave me confused with what it's capable of,
I said.
But you've gotten used to it now,
said Spike.
Maybe, yet it still baffles me to no end,
I said. I hovered over to the first blue block before climbing onto the second and then onto the ledge where I picked up the small key, but now comes the decision of which way to go next. We could check out the room which was unlocked upon completing this trial, or we can go through the other door over there near where I picked up the final silver rupee.
We should see where that unlocked door goes, because it was made available to us for a reason, suggested Spike.
That's a good idea, I said as I jumped back down onto the platform before making my way over to where the door was. Upon opening it and entering the next room, the sound of rushing water suddenly filled my ears, and in front of me were 4 more blue blocks that were covering up some kind of entrance.
I'm guessing that piece of carpeting to my left is where a treasure is going to fall, so what am I supposed to do in here? Collect the underwater gems. Does that answer your question?
Asked Spike.
Yes, it does, although why does it have to be another challenge involving collecting rupees? I mean, I'm not annoyed by it on the one hand as it means getting some money to spend, but on the other hand I was expecting something else.
I replied.
The first thing you need to do is to use the Ocarina of Time to remove those blue blocks, and from there you'll need to switch to both the Zora tunic and the iron boots before jumping down into the water. I also suggest bringing out the long shot as I doubt it will be that easy to collect the rupees down there,
said Spike.
You'll need to turn away while I change tunics because I don't want you to see me without any clothes on, I said.
He turned around without complaining because he knew how I felt, and of course I wasn't comfortable with being naked inside of a strange place. A few moments later, and I was wearing the tunic which complemented my hair, but then I remembered I had to switch over to the iron boots.
Ever since the water temple, the only other time I've had to wear these was in the Shadow Temple with those fans. I'm surprised that they haven't had as much use as I expected given how much trouble I experienced just to get them. Oh, and you can turn around now, Spike, as I've finished changing tunics. For the most part, your regular boots have proven to handle the vast majority of terrain you've experienced, and for that you haven't really had need to use the other pairs unless it was for a specific puzzle, said Spike.
Switching to the iron boots, my feet already felt the weight of them as did the rest of my body, but I played the Song of Time when I took out the ocarina which removed the blue blocks. From there, I walked into the water where I immediately sank to the bottom. On each wall were hook-shot plates while 2 shell blades were located at 2 corners with an ancient trap spinning around in the center. Good thing Spike suggested the long shot as I'm going to need it, but the water current is going to make getting the rupees a little challenging due to how strong it is.
I need to deal with the monsters first, I said. Remember that ancient trap will cause some knockback if it hits you, and that can be really bad when underwater, said Spike. Not surprising, I moaned.
I slowly walked over to the first shell blade where I fired the chain into its mouth the instant it opened, and destroyed it. Then I fired at the other one, not realizing its shell was facing me, so my shot bounced off and got stuck in the wall.
Well, I was expecting that to happen eventually after such an amazing streak where I didn't miss anything with my weapons. You just need to be a little more patient, said Spike. A simple practice I should have learned by now, I moaned. As soon as I pulled the chain out from the wall, the shell blade then opened its mouth, and I fired into it which destroyed it, so that left me with collecting the rupees. I could pull myself towards the rupees by firing at the plates on the walls, but would it be easier if I switch back and forth between boots to get them that way? That would make things faster, but the problem is the water current will be controlling where you go, replied Spike. I had forgotten to take that into consideration, I said. Not to mention the ancient trap is still spinning around in the center of the room where it will serve as an annoyance more than anything else. You need to avoid that because the damage will pile up if it hits you repeatedly,"
said Spike. "Looks like I'm doing this the hard way, but then that's okay as I need to get used to underwater mechanics as it's been a while." Firing the long shot at the plates on the walls allowed me to grab most of the rupees, and the ancient trap did end up hitting me a few times much to my displeasure.
"Only one more rupee to go," I said. "I can see it up there at the top of the room,"
said Spike.
"There are no hook shot plates for me to use," I said. "Guess you'll need to switch back to your regular boots after all, get it when the water current pushes you,"
said Spike. The moment I changed back to my boots, I began swimming upward before allowing the current to guide me around the room. It felt really weird doing this because all I was doing was going around in a rather awkward circle, but eventually I collected the final rupee, which cost a small treasure chest to drop down onto the carpet. Upon hearing that sound, I swam back up to the surface before climbing back out, and stepping over to the chest where I kicked it open to reveal the next key.
"You know, I feel sad because the Gerudo are always preparing to fight," I said. "Survival means everything to them, for it's been that way for generations. The other tribes have never had the need to train with such intense methods because they live in ideal areas. As for fighting being a part of their blood, they fight in order to survive the next day. It's essentially a never-ending cycle where nothing much can be done about it,"
said Spike.
"Could this be something that Ganondorf decided?"
I asked.
"This was a law of the tribe which has existed long before he was born, so all he's doing is following the traditions set upon him by his predecessors. They have been isolated for a long time, resulting from fear that outsiders would come along, and attempt to assimilate them into a more meaningful society. Given how small their numbers are, I suspect it will take about 1 or 2 generations before they have no choice, but accept such a reality,"
replied Spike.
"I never thought they would be such a sympathetic group," I said. "You might say Ganondorf himself is a man who had sympathy for his people before he claimed the Triforce,"
said Spike. "I'm not so sure if I can sympathize with a man like him, but I suppose he does deserve a tiny bit considering the kind of harsh existence they've been living before and during his reign." I went back to the previous room which had the lava, and this time I took out the long shot and aimed towards the hook shot plate to the right. I pulled myself along and opened the door. I entered a chamber that I first thought was filled with fire, but upon second glance it was just another circle of fire, and a large assortment of fire monsters. There were some strange statues alongside each of the walls, and I remember them from the fire temple. I couldn't go back for the door had locked behind me thanks to iron bars.
"Find the hidden secret in this room. Guess I'm going to need the megaton hammer for the first time in what feels like forever,"
I moaned. While I was about to solve this next challenge, a conversation was taking place inside the tent back in Gerudo Valley. Thanks to my rescuing the 4 carpenters from the fortress, they repaired the bridge, which meant no longer needing to have Epona jump over the gap, as now it's a straight path across.
"I've got to admit that those workers of yours did a fantastic job. While they are lazy and believe themselves deserving of so much food during a meal, their skills as carpenters are unmatched. With the bridge now fixed, travel through the valley will resume as normal, but I'm surprised that you're still here." "And why is that?" "I would have guessed you to have gone back to Hyrule Field in order to resume your running, or at least challenge someone to one of those marathons. It's been some time since I last had a good challenger. You are known throughout Hyrule as someone who can beat anyone or anything when it comes to running, but I'm guessing from the tone in your voice that you feel somewhat uninspired running woman. Most people in the kingdom lack the keen instinct to race against me, and it saddens me to see how lazy people are. I believed everyone would be in shape, especially with all of the monsters, but instead all they do is go about their business in fear. Because of that, whenever people choose to race me, I end up beating them and they would finish nearly 30 minutes after me. In truth, I was thinking about trying a new challenge which hopefully will rekindle my desire to want to run,"
said Arya.
"What do you have in mind?" Sunset Shimmer is heading into the desert once she's finished with her errands in the Garudoa's fortress, and I intend on going with her because the kind of challenge I crave lies within there. I don't care whether she wants me along or not, for I intend on following her and get the inspiration which has been missing from my life,"
replied Arya.
"Last night's meal must have given you some kind of mental shock." "And why do you say that, Muto?"
asked Arya.
"Where that girl is going is a place where people like you would perish. If the monsters don't kill you, then the eternal sandstorm will make sure you never return. While you want to go because of trying to fulfill a personal urge, in truth you're just going off to your death and you have a long life left in you,"
replied Sweetie Belle.
"I knew you were going to say that,"
said Arya.
"I can't believe she made her way over to the Garudoa's fortress at night. Not only that, she managed to outwit all of the guards and rescue my men without even breaking a sweat. That's what I mean when I say that you don't have what it takes. While your speed is the stuff of legend, that isn't going to help you in a place which can slow down even the fastest of creatures,"
said Sweetie Belle.
"Regardless, I'm still going,"
said Arya.
"Yeah, I figured you would,"
said Sweetie Belle.
"Not going to give me another lecture, Muto?"
asked Arya.
"You're just as stubborn as I am despite me being older, but then you have a certain flair which makes you different. If you end up dying out there in the desert, don't you dare come back to haunt me as a spirit,"
replied Sweetie Belle.
"The happy mask saleswoman is planning on going as well,"
said Arya.
"Now why would she want to do something that crazy?"
asked Sweetie Belle.
"She said something about going into the desert looking for masks. The ancient Garudo were known for burying their treasures out there in the sand, but the modern iteration have no desire to find them as they view such relics as being of the past,"
replied Arya.
"Figures that would be her reason, but she is just as crazy as you are,"
said Sweetie Belle.
"I'm sure she will be fine,"
said Arya.
"I suspect Sunset Shimmer is going to refuse both of you on the principle of wanting to make sure nothing bad happens. Where she is going, there is nothing but death awaiting her. I know that I already mentioned it to you, and that I'm just repeating myself, but it's my way of letting you know if you intend on going through with this, you may never come back alive. Think carefully before you make your final decision, for it could be the last one,"
said Sweetie Belle. The challenges inside of the Garudoa's training ground had gotten more ridiculous, and at the same time rather repetitive, which struck me as being odd. After finding the hidden secret, the next trial involved shooting the eyes of 4 connected statues without missing a single shot. This one took a lot longer than expected, given this little trick didn't become clear to me until I clued in on it later. On the other side, I had to deal with defeating more monsters in a short time limit, and collecting more silver rupees in a ridiculous obstacle course. By the time I reached the next room, I found myself stumped because there was nothing to be found.
"So what is with this room?"
I asked.
There should be some kind of trial in here, but all I'm seeing is a door to the right, and a massive block in front. Aside from that, this chamber is completely bare, which could mean they have run out of trials,"
replied Spike.
"And here I thought I could relax a little,"
I moaned.
"The Guru don't never have time to do that, for they are always training even when they really aren't,"
said Spike.
"Without the necessary items, one will be confounded by impossible mysteries." "What do you suppose that means?"
I asked.
"It sounds like certain weapons you've collected are needed in order to figure out the puzzle, but the question is which ones will prove to be what you need,"
replied Spike. As I walked further into the room, I could see that the door to the right looked out of place, and I remembered seeing something like it back in the fire temple. Taking out the megaton hammer, I walked as close as possible before slamming it where it shattered to pieces, and there was nothing suspicious lurking behind it. The giant block then caught my attention, yet how am I supposed to push what could be the heaviest object I've come across so far?
"I don't think you have the strength to move this block anywhere, Sunset Shimmer." "That's what I was thinking as well,"
I said.
"Perhaps there is a way to push it forward, but we either never found it or we haven't come across it yet,"
suggested Spike.
"Guess I'll just ignore it unless a miracle were to happen,"
I sighed.
"If there is a key in the room behind this block, it would be a crushing blow considering how far you've come,"
said Spike. This was true, because I've endured so much that to falter at the final hurdle is just not acceptable. So far, I had collected 7 keys, but I wasn't sure how many I needed to make my way to the treasure chest. Feeling dejected, I was about to head back to the central chamber when I noticed something was off about the wall where the fake door was.
"Is it just me, or does the coloring seem a little off to you?"
I asked.
"Good eye for noticing it, as I never would have suspected anything to be amiss,"
replied Spike.
"Maybe I can use the lens of truth,"
I suggested. I took it out, and I placed it over my right eye where the wall disappeared, revealing another passageway which led up to a door. On the ceiling was a hook-shot plate, but it looks like the lens needs to remain active so that I can see where to aim. Holding the lens in my left hand, and taking out the long shot with my right hand, I aimed for the plate before pulling myself along after firing the chain. The next room was in fact the one where I had to hit the eyes of the statue, but now I was on the upper path which led towards another door. Making sure not to fall off, as that would involve having to backtrack, I opened it and entered a room which was nothing but a dead end, but the small treasure chest must mean something good. As I walked forward towards it, a fence served as the floor, yet I could also see what was lurking below.
"Isn't that the central chamber down there beneath us? If we look closely, we might be able to find the correct path we need,"
replied Spike.
"Correct path?"
I asked. That was when I kicked open the treasure chest, which revealed yet another small key. Still, I wish that I could have seen what was beyond that heavy stone block, but without the necessary strength to push it, I have no chance of knowing.
"When we entered the central chamber, there were 2 directions we could take. If we choose the wrong path, we'll end up not earning the prize due to not having enough keys to open the necessary doors,"
replied Spike. He then floated through the fence as he was small enough, and quickly checked to see which of the 2 paths was ideal before making his way back up to me.
"The left path is where we need to go upon entering the central chamber from the correct side."
When he said that, I quickly remembered there was a second entrance which can be accessed from the room with the lava.
"Looks like we have to backtrack," I said. "It will take about a couple of minutes given how small this place is compared to the temples,"
said Spike.
That's probably the one good thing about their training ground that I do like,
I said. Don't get me wrong, for while I did enjoy being challenged to trials that were deemed too difficult by the Gerudo, I wasn't thrilled by how ridiculous they got, although it did get toned down towards the end. I didn't have to deal with respawning monsters, yet some traps were still active, like those flame walls, which ended up giving me some slight burns. Upon returning to the central chamber, I made sure to double-check on how many keys I had picked up.
Okay, I have 8 keys altogether, which should be enough to get me to the treasure chest. And if you don't?
Asked Spike.
Then we have no choice but to leave here disappointed that we couldn't get it after coming so close, and I'll probably curse myself for not finding the item which can allow me to push that heavy stone block we saw earlier,
I replied.
At least you managed to make it farther than even the Gerudo, for they would never have been able to complete certain trials without the proper gear. I'd say that you can hold your head up high knowing that you did what no one else has done,
said Spike.
Yeah, I suppose you're right,
I said.
Still, 8 should be sufficient, as I doubt they would make you need to collect all of them,
said Spike.
Only way to know for certain is open up all of the doors, and hope for the best,
I said. Taking out all of the keys, I opened the one on my left which Spike suggested, and from there I proceeded to open each subsequent door. Along the way, small chests were scattered about, which had me wondering why they were there in the first place.
I'm not sure what to make of these chests, but I'm compelled to open them up and see what lies inside of them, yet is that the right thing to do? Considering they lie beyond each door you unlock, I'd say it's a means of rewarding you with small prizes for having beaten some of the trials. I guess they didn't want to make you leave here empty-handed, so this must have been set up to make you feel happy with giving it your best shot. The rewards must increase in value with every door, but it's up to you to decide what to do with them,
replied Spike.
I'll open them up on the way back as my focus is on the big one in the middle,
I said.
Then let's hope you can reach it,
said Spike. As I opened more and more doors, I felt very nervous about the possibility of running out right at the very end, but I kept going because I needed to believe that I will make it. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of the final door, and I still had one more key to use, which was a huge sigh of relief as it meant I had completed this place. When I unlocked the final door and opened it up, I was staring at the big treasure chest, which I promptly opened, and took out an arrow which had a chunk of ice surrounding the tip.
So this is the prize?
I asked.
Strange that it would be this of all things,
replied Spike.
What is it?
I asked.
This would be the ice arrow, the second of the 3 magical arrows which you can find in Hyrule. When you change your arrows to this one, you can fire a cold chill which can freeze enemies upon hitting them. However, most are immune to being frozen, so at best what you have here is just a flashy means of destroying them which consumes magic. You should show this off with pride, given that you've beaten the Gerudo's training ground, yet it's not as good as it could have been considering how far we've come,
replied Spike.
I remember one of those gossip stones mentioning about the prize here being not as good as expected,
I said.
You can't blame it for being so accurate, but I suppose this is better than getting nothing for all that hard work,
said Spike.
And I got some worthwhile experience which should help me make it across the haunted wasteland,
I said.
With 2 of the magic arrows in your possession, there is only one more left which only the royal family knows about,
said Spike.
Since we now know that Twilight is alive somewhere, we just have to hope that we can find her one day, and maybe acquire this final magic arrow. In the meantime, I just want to get off here, and take a nap, because this turned out to be as intense as the Shadow Temple what with the She-Demon's challenges. Speaking of Sunset Demon, she is waiting for me, and I must be ready when the time comes if I am to defeat her once and for all,"
I said. As I started to walk back through the central chamber, something else was happening deep within the haunted wasteland, which was my next destination. I had no idea what was happening, but it was going to be another problem which I would need to overcome.
"Are you certain about this, sister? I'm not going to allow that girl to set one foot inside of the Desert Colossus. The great Ganondorf wishes for us to kill her on his behalf, so taking this kind of drastic action would be going against his wishes. He said that we could handle this in whatever way we see fit, yet I'm annoyed by how he viewed our magic as being weak. Just because Spitfire was able to break free of my control doesn't make us useless in the grand scheme. It's strange how he forgets that it was through our guidance that he even became the man that he is today, but I suppose obtaining the Triforce has blinded him to a couple of truths here and there. You shouldn't speak such words about our son, and yet I cannot help but agree that he has forgotten his roots. Glad to see you agree with me. Still, using our minion to prevent her from getting out of the wasteland alive does seem like an extreme course of action. While I have no doubt that she possesses the means to make it here, I'm sure she will end up just like all the rest. And if she survives, then I guess you do make a valid point about wanting to use our minion, but are you sure it's ready to handle such a task? It took an awful lot of magic to create this creature, and we wouldn't want it to end up failing after spending years perfecting it. I have no problem with you using it to slow her down, or even kill her, but if she manages to make it close enough, it should retreat before it ends up being destroyed or something. Yes, it would be a travesty if we were to lose this one, my sister, so I agree to your terms. Besides, the girl has got her own problem waiting in our temple. That accursed she-demon. The very one. I'm not sure why the great Ganondorf wants her to handle the task of killing the girl, but he did say that as long as he gets what he needs in the end, it doesn't matter what the final outcome is going to be. I would have just obliterated that creature and be done with it, yet it's protected by a magic which makes it immune to all others, with the sole exception of the magic that girl possesses. Why do you suppose that is? I don't know, yet it feels like those two have otherworldly magic, which would mean they were from another world. Bah! Let's just ignore that and focus on what we're doing. Oh, loyal minion! Hear the words of the ones who created you, and gave you life where none had existed before. There is a child coming with the foolish notion of breaking the curse on our temple, and you have been commanded to make sure she doesn't succeed in. Do what you must to kill her, so that no one will ever come this way again. Go now to the edge of the haunted wasteland, and end her life.
To be continued. Chapter 55, The Cursed Desert.